Back to the book. In everyday randori practice, fighting against another person is not the real purpose of the practice of judo. Because fighting to see who will win is interesting, it is done on a daily basis. Yes, it is. It goes without saying that becoming able to beat someone is one of the ultimate goals of the practice of randori. However, there's clearly a difference between becoming able to beat someone at a future time and becoming obsessed at beating someone now. In order to beat someone now, it is best for those who are strong to use that strength to overcome the other person's strength. However, with that method, if you encounter an opponent who is much stronger than you are, you will naturally lose. So even if you lose for a while, the correct practice of randori is to slip dexterously away from your opponent, adapt to his strength, cause him to lose his balance while stepping back, and then take advantage of the opportunity to perform a waza. If you do this kind of training, you will, for a while, often be twisted by the arm and held down or pushed down by your opponent. But if you do not frequently engage in this kind of training, you will never learn how to beat a stronger opponent. So this is what we talk about all the time when we talk about relaxing and trying to relax and putting yourself in bad positions and not using your strength. That's what we're talking about. And again, that applies to life as well. That applies to not staying in your comfort zone, not continuing to concentrate on what you're good at. Focus on your weaknesses. That's what that talks about.
It's interesting how he said don't be focused on beating the other guy. You know, it's almost like Hoyler talked about that real briefly, right when I first met him, where he was like it's not like you're not looking how big the guy is, how tough he is, what belt he has, and all this stuff. It's like you're focusing on your jiu-jitsu, what's lacking, what I know and don't know. You know, if I'm focusing on the other guy and I'm going to beat him and all this stuff, that's not what the jiu-jitsu is.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and say this. Like, this sounds good. But we all, I mean, at least every single person I train with, like, we're trying to win.
Trying to win, yeah,
now,
for sure.
that being said, now, actually, I'm going to go ahead and correct myself. Like, we train, we want to win, but, like, you take way more risks training with our training team than you would take if you were training with someone else.
Yeah.
Right? You take risks, you try new things, you put yourself in bad positions. Oh, I'm going to try this arm lock, I'm going to try this choke, even though I might end up on the bottom, but that's okay. And well, you know what I mean? So I guess that's true. I don't focus completely on just trying to beat the other person. Yeah, so that's actually very accurate. And I think as you start this game, that's the best attitude to have, is like, hey, you got to relax. And I was talking to a buddy of mine that's just starting jiu-jitsu out, and he's like my age. And yeah, he's like, man, I'm trying to relax harder. He's like, I'm trying to relax harder. And actually what I sent him a text, and I was like, it's like rock climbing. Have you ever done any rock climbing before?
Yes.
So there's technique in rock climbing. Like, there's legit technique, obviously. Well, it's not obvious. If you've never rock climbed before, there's a massive amount of technique in rock climbing. It's the way you position your fingers, the way you position your hands, the way you use your legs. You don't hang the weight on your muscles. You hang it on your bones and your ligaments, so you're not getting tired. Your muscles aren't getting tired out because you're using the technique. If you don't know rock climbing, guess what you do? You hang on to the freaking rock with all your muscle and as long as you can. And that's exactly what happens in jiu-jitsu. Yeah. When your technique is good, you're just going to hang on.
Yeah. Yep.
Hang on.
The whole thing about jiu-jitsu and winning, and he used the word obsessed. Like if you jam up, you get jammed up.
A little bit of a different scenario, isn't it?
Yeah, and really, when you really look at it, I mean, in the moment, you want to beat the guy. Like that's when you train with someone in jiu-jitsu, or especially when you compete in jiu-jitsu. That's actually where the shift kind of occurs. He mentioned competition as not a spectator sport. This is just for experimental purposes. Yeah. Did he use
research,
the word research purposes, which is essentially just training, really. So it's like,
for sure.
It's kind of like how when they started the first UFC, that was what they were kind of pushing too. They were like, we're gonna see what
style
martial arts,
style.
Yeah, exactly right. But really, the thing that people came to see was that, for sure. But it was a show, like who's gonna win and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And when you really look at it, so UFC 1, 2, all these things, it was, I don't want to say rare, but it was almost rare when, aside from Hoist Gracie, of course, and Ken Shamrock and stuff like this, it was really rare to see the style get maintained. It was like these karate guys, and they had their stance, and the fight would start, and it's just this street fight. Yeah, exactly right. So, and that was part of the research kind of thing. But people were there to see who's going to kick whose ass. But in jiu-jitsu, when you really think about it, we are kind of maintaining that. Like we want to see,
we are researching all the time.
Yeah, and
how is this going to work?
And here you can fall back and forth. Like sometimes you can get sucked into being obsessed with beating that guy, and maybe if you kind of use it, it's like using anger to help you, I don't know, get more strength or something just for a moment or whatever. I kind of think that's okay, and I think we all kind of do it in one way or another. Not the anger thing necessarily, but I'm gonna. Like me and you, for example, I might incorporate a little bit of today. So I'm going to get Jocko today. That's what I'm kind of focused on for a second. Yeah, for a second to help me get better. Maybe even get me past a mental barrier or something like that. You can do it. But the big picture is just what he's talking about. I just want to get better at my jiu-jitsu kind of thing.
And I will say this too. Ego-wise, I think it's very positive to be like, I don't want to lose. And the only way you're not going to lose is to train all the time.
Yeah.
So the days that you're like, well, I don't, like yesterday I was on a different time zone, came back. I got back in the day. I had a work to do as soon as I hit the ground. I got done with that. I hit a quick workout, and now it's like, guess what time it is? Jiu-jitsu time. And I'm like, well, it's like, oh well, maybe it's been a long day. Yep. Like my shoulder kind of hurts right now. So maybe I'll just,
rest.
Then I was like, no, I'm going to train. Yeah. Because what I know is not training, it's not training one day might not make a difference, but that one day does make a difference. You might tell yourself it doesn't make a difference, but there's something in there. There's every day of training you can get matters. Every day counts. You can't get it back. And if you miss it, you miss it. Especially like right now, where I've been traveling a lot lately, way more than normal. Mm-hmm. So I know, like, if I got to get there, I got to get my rounds in. Mm-hmm. Got to get my rounds in. That's the way it's got to be. And part of that is my ego. Part of this is my ego saying, look, I got to, I got to fight. I got to stay on top. I got to stay on top of the mountain as high as I can, right?
Hungry lions out
here.
The
young bucks are out there. They're coming after me.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. But that keeps me in check. My ego, the positive part of ego is that I do want to win. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to get beat. Now, that being said, guess who I train with? I train with all the guys that are most likely to beat me. That's what I want. I want to have that happen. So there's a balance. There's a good balance there.
And at the end of the day, there's really no escape it. And I think it's real prevalent, like for you and Dean, it's really prevalent where, sure, you have all that. You have all those thoughts, in your head or whatever, but it all comes in. The whole reason you have that thought is to get better at jiu-jitsu.
For sure. Because when you start jiu-jitsu, you're like, some people say, even me, like, well, I just want to get good enough to, like, be able to defend myself. Well, after 6 months, man, you're good. Yeah. So what am I doing here 25 years later still doing the same damn thing? Yeah. It's because, like, there's a couple guys that I want to keep ahead of or even with or catch, like that's what's driving you. So there's a definite ego thing involved. But I think where that goes too far, the ego goes too far. This is an obvious answer is like, I don't really, I'm not going to train with that guy because he might catch me. Mm-hmm. Right. Then now you're not progressing. Yeah. Now you're in this thing that he's talking about. Like you're not going to progress because you're not going to train with that person, or you're not going to take any risks whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So you're just going to defend, and you're like, I survived the round and I'm out of here. Yeah. So you gotta keep that attitude of like, hey, I'm gonna get beat. Yeah. And that's the thing. Jiu-jitsu works, man. Yeah. Jiu-jitsu works. And if somebody catches you, doesn't matter who they are. Right. If they catch you, jiu-jitsu works. You tap out. You go again. That's the beautiful thing about jiu-jitsu. Yes. That's the beautiful thing about life. Because in life, you're not going to win every time. Yeah. You're going to get caught. You're going to make mistakes. Someone's going to capitalize on them. So what are you going to do? You're going to give up? And even more important than that, you can lose. You can lose. Whatever thing you're trying to do, you can lose. You're trying to start a new business, you can lose. You're trying to get a new job, you can lose. You can lose in life. So are you going to prevent that from even let that prevent you from even getting on the mat in the first place, on even trying to start a new business, even trying to do something that's outside your comfort zone? That's what this is saying, is get outside your comfort zone. Yeah. Don't sit there. It's not going to help you.
Yeah. And you can see it with the guys who you can tell are just focused on like being the guy who beat the other guy kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they'll do those kinds of things. They'll roll. And then when they, after, 2-3 rounds, when they feel their steam kind of going down, they'll leave. Or they'll sit on the side and talk and be like, I'm not rolling anymore. Or they'll only roll small guys.
I did that to Andy yesterday.
What?
We did like 6 rounds. And I was like, bro, I need some backup. Because, he's training for events. I'm like, I'm going to give, I was like, hey, I called Dr. Luke. I'm like, Dr. Luke, give me some help over here. I need some backup.
Yeah.
Because got to get him to step it up.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, or what's the reality is, when I have the time, or not when I have the time, but like, I always get my rounds in too. Like, if we got 2 guys that are competing and we're doing, 2 in 1 out, like, I put them through it and then I go through it too, because I want to get my training, because I'm trying to get better too, to your point.
Yeah. You're not in there trying to beat Andy kind of thing, but you guys are training.
I'm trying to get better.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I mean. And it's obvious, but what's a big symptom of someone who's focusing on the wrong thing is like, if they don't do well or whatever, and they say stuff like, "Oh, you're lucky this isn't MMA" or something like that.
Oh,
they're they're unhappy about the fact that they got beat by you specifically.
Yeah.
Like, I used to train with this guy, will remain nameless, long time ago, and that's what he'd always say. Like, "Oh yeah, if there were strikes, I would have won," kind of thing.
Yeah.
He'd say that kind of stuff all the time. I was like, bro, focusing on the wrong thing right now. The fact that you quote unquote got beat, or I beat you, and this is how you would have beat me. You're focused on the wrong thing.
Why do you think I do? Because I do this. I do the opposite. When I roll with someone, and I'll be like, hey, like, I'll catch him or whatever. I'll be like, yeah, hey, if this was MMA, like, let's say I'm going to the MMA fighter to catch him. I'll be like, hey, if this was MMA, you were on top for a while, you would have been pounding me in the face. That would have been good. You would have won. Or if I'm going against a jiu-jitsu guy and I catch him or something, I'll be like, yeah, though, if that was points, though, you were up like 8 points, you probably would have beat me, and that took me 15 minutes to get, so you would have won.
Yeah, and obviously I don't know exactly what's going on in your head, but it seems like that would be something you'd say to someone to make them kind of feel better. Because, it's a little mini competition in there, for real. I mean, that's essentially what makes it so good, because he's giving you an accurate look how a motivated opponent, attacker, whatever, would look like. He's going full speed against you. So there is that element of like, we're competing against each other. And when you lose, it's kind of like, oh, I lost to this guy. Especially if you're not that used to training or
So I'm just being nice.
You're being nice,
I
think. Guess. And at the same time, if you're saying stuff like, hey, if was MMA, you'd be pounding me or something like that, there could be a little element of your own training, kind of like you're just voicing your mentally, own thoughts. Like, okay, I kept that in mind. Where, I would have got hit there, and you're just kind of voicing it maybe for the benefit of yourself. As well as the guy. I don't know. That's what it seems like would happen if someone was thinking those things.
Check.